Yes, we finally have this all welded up for the last time. So it is almost Halloween. And welcome back everybody to another day in the Freedom and Company garage. Today, we've got some aluminum welding to do. Alrighty guys, so in our last episode you saw us get our fuel tank all finished up and buttoned up over here. So today we are working on finishing up our auxiliary fuel tanks up there that are going to be mounting right over here. But we've got a little bit of welding to do on these first. So our main assemblies are all finished up and these are looking great for what we wanted. But we have a couple things left to do. We have a few AN fittings we need to weld on to here, as well as a crossover tube that will help balance these tanks out. That way they stay at the same fuel level. So on this guy, we are going to weld this pipe in between here. So this is going to be the front of the tank. And when this is mounted, it'll be at a downward angle, just like that. So that means all the fuel will be down in these two here. So we're going to end up welding this across these two at the two lowest points of the tank. That way the fuel will be able to transfer between the two, and this is also going to be where we are going to weld one of our AN fittings, and that will be our draw point for our fuel pump. So to make sure that we're always drawing fuel from these, either if we're leaning one way or banking the other way, we are going to end up putting a bend in this. That way it's a slight radius, and we're going to have it kind of balancing between these two here, and our fuel filling will be right in the middle. That way there will always be fuel funneling down into that one point, and that will be where our fuel pump sucks the fuel to and into our engine. So we're going to break out our Rogue fabrication bender. This thing has been awesome, by the way. I would highly recommend them 100%. So we're going to break this guy out, get to bending that pipe there, and we will start doing some welding.
Faces prolong the embraces. We were always.
So like usual, I'm over here working. Paul, what are you doing?
Fire.
Once for the breakaway, but we're nearing chances to wake the day. They're calling you over, the methods are bolder. We're lost in the time now, reminding ourselves how we were always once for the breakaway.
Guys, I messed up. So hopefully we'll be able to see in the time-lapse footage. But as I was drilling this hole, it yeeted these tanks straight off the table. And now we've got a boo-boo. So fortunately, that's going to be right where our fill AN is going to end up. So you'll never know that happened. But everything else turned out fantastic. So we got our crossover tube welded on there. That turned out really nice. So all the welds around there look pretty decent. We have our -6 AN fitting welded to right in the center of that. That way when these are flipped over, as you can see there, the fuel will be able to flow between these two tanks, which will even out the two levels in there when it gets filled from that boo-boo. And then the fuel will drain down through there into our AN fitting and then to our fuel pump. So far this is coming along pretty well, minus one little mishap. So we're gonna keep on plugging away. All right guys, so it is a new day, but today, first things first, we are pressure testing our fuel tanks here. So we made a pretty cool submarine so far. We've got a tub that fits these in there, filled it with water, and now we're just gonna add some air pressure just like we did with our other fuel tank over there. And I can already see that there's one little spot on this one closest to me, one little pinhole from where we plugged one of those existing bungs from these air tanks. So it looks like we're gonna have to take it back out, weld over that real quick, blend it back down, and retest it. And guys, it just goes to show how important it is to pressure test or air test all of your tanks, especially with gasoline. So I don't know how I missed that, but it is right there, that little tiny speck right at the tip of that filler wire. And that was what was leaking so much, and it's that tiny little speck. So again, if you're ever welding on tanks or anything that's going to be holding any liquids, always do some pressure checks, some airtight tests. Just goes to show how little something can be and still make such a big difference.
What are you doing there, princess?
Alright, so we got this pinhole welded up on the end, and that looks pretty good. You can hardly tell it was there. So I had to hand file that down just because you can't really get any of the grinders or die grinders in there. I didn't want to hit with the carbide. So yeah, file was the safest way. So we're going to go ahead and test it again and see how good of a welder I am. Hey, not seeing any bubbles. Are you?
No bubbles here.
So we changed our plan around just a little bit more once again because we kind of figured out something that would work a little bit better. So initially we were going to do some tubes internally that you wouldn't be able to see whatsoever. And so the end would have to be way up here at the top, and we'd have to have an exit point over here that would go over in this area. But we're kind of thinking, since we need a mount, why not integrate our vent and our mounting all in one? So you saw us cut these little tubes here, you saw us thread them, so now they've got a nice M10 by 1.5 thread on them with some stainless steel nuts. We'll use some locking compound, something on those after. But right now we have our tanks perfectly centered in between our subframe here. So we're going to go ahead and mark these, and then we will weld the end of this tube onto here, and then that will be our mount and our vent tube. And so our vent will come up through our tail section, which is all covered by fairings, and then we'll have the vent tube running down to our tank over there. So everything will be hidden, nice and clean. You won't see anything externally, and it's a dual purpose. All right, so we have our rear mounts figured out. So now we're gonna look in the trailer and see if we've got any other aluminum that we can use for the other mounts. So if we need any parts, they're usually in the storage trailer, and this is our bin of raw aluminum in here. So we've got some flat plate, some tubing, some flat stock, some solid stock, all the good stuff. So we're gonna dig through this and see if we can find something. So it came down to two options for that rear mount, and I think we're gonna go with the thicker stuff. So we had some like 1/8 inch flat bar, but it's a little flimsy, and for something like this, we don't want the fuel tank moving whatsoever. So I actually have some thicker, I guess you could call it plate at this point. It was cut out of a plate, and that happens to be the exact same width that we're gonna need for our subframe there. So what we'll end up doing is just marking this and cutting a nice strip right out of here, maybe like an inch and a half, just about like yay, and we'll drill our holes through that and then weld that straight to our tank. And then of course we're gonna have our vent screw holders coming through here. Alright guys, so I went to blow off the tank and I had my hand holding it on the back side, and as you can see I went and blew off the aluminum shavings as from all the die grinding, and it just blew them all straight into my finger. So either wear gloves or be careful where you're blowing your shards.
Tank man, yeah, that's me.
Alright.
Man, yeah, that's you.
Alright guys, so we finally got our tank mounted once and for all. Well, not once and for all because we have to take it back off quite a few times, but we have our brackets made, we have our vent slash mounting studs welded on, and this thing is looking pretty good. So we had to have just a little bit of gap for our plate here and our weld here, and then we also have our fairings and our bottom plate that go in between here, so that'll be just about a perfect distance in between there. We have our bottom feed line all welded on like before, so now we have two little parts we have to do left. We have to weld on the transfer tube that goes from that AN fitting there, which will go to one of the sides around here, probably right here where I dented it. So hopefully I can cover that up and nobody will ever know except you guys, so don't tell anybody. And then we just need a return line, which is going to be a -6 into here as well. So we're going to try to start playing around with some of that stuff and figure out what goes where best.
See the lights on the other side. I'm going to get there and hope we will meet there. Going to get there and hope we will meet there. heart took it far away. See the lights.
Alrighty guys, we finally have this all welded up for the last time. So it is almost Halloween, but this thing is almost done. So we got our mounts done, we got our rear done there, we got our mount here, we have our dash 12AN fitting done here. You can look at them welds there. So they look pretty good. We got a dash 6 over here for our return. We have our balancing tube here. We have another dash 6 on that tube for our draw. And these are our vents up here. So we should be covered on all of this stuff, finally. So we've had a couple people ask already what TIG welder I use. And I get some pretty good results with the machine here. It's kind of just basic settings. It goes way deeper than what I even kind of adjust it to. But we're running an HTP Invertig 221. And it is a pretty great machine for everything that it does. I actually used this same machine when when I did aerospace TIG welding. We had this machine in the shop and it does great. So I've got this mated with a Miller Coolmate 4 water cooler. So it's a full water cooled torch. That way it keeps everything nice and cool and your torch doesn't melt. And kind of for basic settings, so just for that little stuff, I was running 200 amps, and I do use the pedal, so I'm not using all 200 of that. And then for balance, so I'm running 75 for the frequency, and then balance I'm running 70 as well. So pretty basic settings there. It gets pretty decent results for what it is, and that's kind of my go-to. If I'm running thicker stuff, I'll change that up. Thinner, same thing. If we need a little bit more cleaning, if it's a little bit dirtier, it's just kind of come as you go basis depending on what you're working with. But those are my basic settings for some of this stuff. We can finally say that this dang tank is all welded up and mounted where it needs to be with all the appropriate fittings for the last time. It's been a challenge for sure getting all our fuel system figured out. As you guys can see, we've got vent tubes, we've got a fill, we've got an outlet, we've got a return inlet. So there's a lot to figure out in such a small space. But you can see we've got a bend here for that will go to our fuel pump. This is going to be the return from our fuel pressure regulator. This is going to be our fill neck here. Kind of hard to see with the lighting. But this will go to that bung right there on the tank. And then up here you can see what we did with those vent tubes. So those go through right over here, up through the mount, and then that's a hollow tube, and so this will run back to that little fitting right there, and that will let the air escape from these as it fills up with the gasoline, comes up here, it lets the air that's up here go out and displaces all that in there. Seriously?
Sorry. That's my mom. I gotta answer. Hi, Mom. Say hi to YouTube.
Hi.
Hi. Marketing director calling for business.
Before our marketing director rudely interrupted us. Just kidding, we love her. We were showing you guys everything that we had to do on here, and this was definitely our biggest challenge out of everything here, is getting all this fuel system figured out. There was so much to pack in such a small area. So this is where we're going to kind of mount our fuel pressure regulator. So you can see we've got a 90 on there, a 90 on that side, and that sits right in here just underneath our tank. We've got just enough room for our lines to come down there. The one last thing we kind of have to figure out is where to mount our fuel pump. And we're going to think it's going to be kind of sitting right in this little valley right in here. And we've got a ton of different fittings that we're going to be running from there up there and to that over to here and all sorts of stuff. So that is all going to be in our next video, is how we're going to plumb everything. And that will be how to kind of plumb that fuel pump, the fuel pressure regulator on a motorcycle just like this. So that is the plan for our next episode. make sure and keep an eye out for that. Turn those notification bells on if you want to see all of our crazy hose plummingness that is going to be going on in here. But so far, our progress is looking pretty good. We're really happy with how everything is turning out. I mean, just look at what we've done so far. All the fairings fit over all of our frame over that gas tank. Everything is fitting up very nicely in here. As you can see, we've still got plenty of room for a battery in here and some electronics going back over here. So it's really coming together. So like I said, next episode, we're going to be plumbing everything up, and then hopefully we might be able to start it soon. So thank you guys again so much for watching. We appreciate it. Cooper appreciates it. And again, if you guys like what we're doing, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. It really means a lot. If you really want to support us, check out our Patreon account. Everything that you guys donate goes straight to working on this thing and our future projects that we've got planned. Take a second, check that stuff out. Follow us on Instagram. Check out the Patreon. Like, subscribe, turn on those notification bells, and we will see you next time.